So let's see how bored you can be at the end of this video. These are the British Army respirator anti-gas light. What we don't have is a Mark 1. There's no Mark 1. Mark 2, that's a Mark 2. Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5, Mark 6, Mark 6A, don't have a Mark 7. In all respects, all the masks in these bags look a bit like this one. There are very slight differences between the marks for wearer comfort, which make it a different mark. And between each mark, there would be slight modifications. So in the case of that one, that's a Mark 6, which replaced a Mark 5. That's a Mark 6/2, which had slight modifications. So between the Mark 6 and the Mark 7, which I don't have, came a Mark 6/2. The Mark 6/2 eventually becomes the Mark 7. You know how it goes. So officially termed the respirator anti-gas light, it was intended to replace the general service respirator that you saw in the previous video, and it was to become the new standard issue respirator. It was not an exclusive airborne item, as some claim, although when these were on the drawing board as early as 1938, the original intention of a self-contained respirator was an exclusive item which was supposed to be only issued to commandos, paratroopers and tank crews. But as the war progressed, it was soon evident that the general service respirator was too restrictive, and a new respirator had to be issued to all arms. The new respirator was lighter and eliminated the heavy filter, hose and haversack of the previous general service respirator. The drawback was the filter box was smaller and had longer life than the general service respirator. Now, the filter on all these masks is on the left-hand side as you wear the mask. So although looking at the camera, it's on the right-hand side, as you wear the mask, it's actually on the left-hand side. Ideal if you're a right-handed shooter, no good if you're a left-handed shooter. Some trials were made with the filter on this side, but the masks with the filter on this side for a left-handed shooter were trialled, but they were never actually issued. So if you get one of these masks with that filter on this side, it's a very rare item. So left-handed shooters, the British Army tried to discourage left-handed shooters because of how the bolt was placed on the standard issue rifle for right-handed shooters. So if you were a left-handed shooter, you didn't get this mask. Instead, you got the general service respirator issued. The filter used in these masks is the only World War II British filter not to contain asbestos. Now, as you know, most World War II filters contain a thin asbestos sheet wall at the halfway point, separating the resin-impregnated wool from the charcoal. This filter has a metal mesh wall down the middle, which does away with the asbestos one. So the filter, if I unscrew this one, kind of from there to the halfway point, it's full of resin impregnated wool. You can see the white wool there, and at the halfway point you have a sheet of wire mesh, and then from here backwards it's activated charcoal. Now most World War II British masks will still have the impregnated wool. It'll still have the charcoal, but the centre of it will be a sheet of asbestos. But even there's no asbestos in these things, right? It's an old gas mask, so it's not advisable to wear them. The masks come in various marks, and between each mark there can be sub-variants, and each mark is a slight improvement over the previous one, and then enough modifications will be made to make it a brand new mark. For example, that one there is a Mark 6. The one that's missing from here would be a Mark 7. Between the Mark 6 and the Mark 7, there's a Mark 6/2. That means that was a Mark 6 that's been slightly modified from the Mark 6, and it's been modified enough for the boffins to go, well, this is a different mask to the Mark 6. We'll call it the Mark 6/2 or variant 2. And the slight differences can be anything from slight differences to the internal valve inlet to different coloured rubber mastic used in the sealing process. That's enough to make it a slight variant. Then enough variations will be done to it to make it a different mark. So from Mark 1, which I don't have, right the way through to Mark 5, these are World War II. From the Mark 6 up to the Mark 7, they are post-war, and then out comes the S6 NBC mask, and onwards with the NBC series. So, the first one to come out of these was a Mark 1, which will be trialled in North Africa. And the really only difference is the Mark 1, in the middle of the nose, would have like a long flutter valve, like on the British Civil Defence / ARP gas mask that made the farty noise, you know, the one. That would be the Mark 1. But eventually it lost the flutter valve, and the Mark 1 would be modified for user comfort, and that would turn into this one, which is the Mark 2 out of that bag there. And shortly afterwards, when this was introduced in 1943, it will be issued to all combat troops. Now, by late summer 1944, every British soldier had a light respirator of some mark or another. Now, with all the modifications, the Mark 2 became an interim in between here, a Mark 2A, which was made of different artificial rubber for people suffering with dermatitis. And enough modifications were made to the Mark 2A for it to become the Mark 3. Now, the Mark 3 had a new frontal design. And the Mark 3 has a screw thread on the front, where we are. The Mark 3, which is in that box, will be different. It had a screw thread to the front. And the screw thread was meant to be for a screw-on radio mic adapter, but no such item was made, as radio operators tended to be issued with the general service respirator T mic that you saw in the previous video. So this one is the Mark 2 screw-on filter, right? And a word on the filters can be wartime dated or post-war, because a lot of these went into the Danish army, the Danish Civil Defence after World War II. So most of these will be post-war dated. And indeed, the Mark 6 and the Mark 7 were post-war versions of the mask. So if you have a wartime dated one of them, you've got a bonus. So the Mark 2, with a different frontal arrangement for the voice thing, became the Mark 3. So this one here is the Mark 3. Same layout, exactly the same, but it's not, because the inlet on the front is a different design. So you've got a screw thread on the front for a screw-on radio mic that never came out. So that's the difference between the Mark 2 and the Mark 3. And then you have more slight differences. Now, the Mark 2, which is that one there, we'll put that back in there. These front pieces are coded. So this one has an L1 valve inlet, which is the L1. That was introduced in December 1941. And that inlet there is found on the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 mask. This one, with the threaded section, is the L3 valve inlet. That was introduced in 1943. And that same inlet can be found on the Mark 3, the Mark 3A, the Mark 4, the Mark 6 and the Mark 7. So there'll be different kind of construction details inside of it to make it a different mark. So there's all sorts of components within there for the kind of voice meter and the breathing apparatus. So then you have the Mark 4 version. This one is the Mark 4. And as you see, this Mark 4 has been modified with a different outlet. It's gone back to this one. So that one, that outlet, is on the Mark 3, the Mark 3A, the Mark 5, Mark 6 and Mark 7. This one, the Mark 4, goes back to being like that one. Plus there's, again, different modifications done to it. It could be the way the straps are fitted, the type of strap on the back of it, internal reinforcing details, but mostly it's modifications done to the inside of here that makes it a different mark. So that's a Mark 4. Then you get onto the Mark 5 light anti-gas respirator. This is the Mark 5. And so you have a slightly different change again. It goes back to this type, and the rubber is much thinner on this example. They all have a similar type of strap. Slightly different reinforcement to the inside. And that's the Mark 5, and again the filter's in there. And then, after the war, they get remade again. So you have the Mark 6. Now the Mark 6 version is just a Mark 5, but it's all post-war. Dated 52. It's got no wartime dates on it. And there's other slight modifications done to the inside for comfort, etc, etc. So that's a Mark 6. And then comes the Mark 6. What's that one? The Mark 6/2. So there would have been a Mark 6/1 before this one. And what this means is that the tape on the Mark 6/2 is a different colour to on the Mark 6. So something like that would make it a slightly different mark. And then the final one to come out would be the Mark 7, which I don't have. So that's the more or less the full marks of the light anti-gas respirator. The bags are all completely identical. The bags really only change when they're issued post-war to the Danish civil defence. Now, in total, 7 marks of these were made, each being a slight improvement on the previous one. And there were interim versions as well. After the war, the Danish civil defence had these in quantity of all marks. Now, those issued to the civil defence are generally marked on the mask with a crown and CF letters for civil forsvaret, which is civil defence. And the bags are modified by being stamped under the lid with a red crown and red CF, and the 37 pattern belt mounts are removed from the back. And usually, what never happened with the World War II version, the Danish issues are issued with a little manual. That was never a feature of the World War II ones. And in Danish use, the mask is called the Model 1945. It doesn't matter which mark it is in the British Army. When it gets issued to the Danish Civil Defence and they mark it up, it's known by the Danish Civil Defence as the Model 1945 gas mask. So, on this one, we'll have a look at a typical bag. You have a shoulder strap. You have a pocket for the square anti-gas tubes. You have another pocket there. That's for your cotton waste. In the bottom, the back, you have a pocket. That's for your anti-gas goggles that you've seen in the last video. In the bottom, there's a little round pocket, a really tiny little round pocket. That's for a tiny round tin of anti-demisting paste. And right in the bottom, you've got you've got a strap, a webbing strap fitted to the bottom. The webbing strap is the keeper for the sling, because when you wear it on the 37 pattern belt, okay, it's worn sideways on the belt. So you don't want the strap dangling down towards your knees. So you take the strap off and it's held by the webbing strap that's in the bottom of there. So if you've ever thought what that little strap was for in the bottom, that's where the sling loops through as a keeper. And all the masks are like this. They're all marked up, similar contractors, but they're all patterned exactly the same like this. The only difference is, I think I do have one. The only difference is with the post-war Danish civil defence issue. This Mark 6 has seen another life with the Danish civil defence. So although this has been a British post-war Mark 6, okay, it doesn't actually have it marked on the mask. This is a Mark 6. The filter, if you look at the filter, it's post-war Danish. The bag is the same light respirator bag, but it's marked CF. In this case, it's black. Black CF with the crown, could also be red on the back. The 37 pattern belt mounts have been taken off. That's typical of a reissue to the Danish civil defence. I think some of these are still with the contents. I'll stick that mk6 up there. Typical contents would be, if I can find them, not in there. Here we are. Typical contents would be, when originally first issued, you would have your outfit anti-dimming. This will be issued with other gas masks as well. And this one is post-war dated, pressed into the metal. You sometimes get these World War II dated as well. These are 55 dated. So inside there, you have your anti-dimming outfit. One side, which is not going to open. One side will be the anti-dimming cream. The other side will be a cloth. And the instructions are printed around it. Also, when new, these masks will be issued with 2 bits of cork. You think, well, what are them for? These are extremely rare. They're always missing. What these are for is when the filter's issued, brand new, okay, little cork goes into there, big cork goes into there, and it's kind of dust cover. And they're always missing from these examples, always missing. Also, a feature of these was there was also a dog tag to the person it's issued to. This dog tag was issued to D.W. Sergeant, Church of England. And the idea of this dog tag would be it would always be mounted somewhere on the mask. So they will always be issued with a dog tag. And this one is the mk5 version. This has got its original dust goggles, and it's also named to the guy, D.W. Sergeant, so all this has always been together. And I think in this pocket here, you've got, because it's the mk5 version, it's the type that's issued for Normandy, Arnhem and the Far East campaign. This one comes with its ointment anti-gas number 6 for tropical use. And this is all original. That silica gel's not original, let's just take the damp off it. But yeah, that's what originally would be in them. So all that's the same guy. Now, if you're a rivet counting perfectionist reenactor, then your must-have mask out of all these for your World War II Normandy Arnhem reenactment is the mk5. If you're not bothered, then any will do, as long as you don't take it out the bag, even a post-war one. But the one you should have is Mr. mk5. That is the kind of World War II D-Day Arnhem mask, and there's a slight difference in colour to the earlier masks because these are a much heavier quality rubber. This is a kind of thinner artificial rubber. Now, something I'm going to point out for any of you folks that are thinking of selling one of these, always include in your photographs a photograph of the underside of the mask, the chin, okay, because the details on the chin is what will be the selling point for the mask. As you see, all of these are exactly the same. So all of these could be sold as light anti-gas respirators, but somebody would go, well, what mark is it? So you could end up buying a mask that is the same mark as the one you've got, unless you take a photograph of under the chin, because thankfully the people that made these handily marked the mark of the items under the chin. So underneath this one, it's got mk2 1943. Underneath this one, it has mk3. Underneath this one, it's got 1V mk4. This one, mk5. So they are all marked in the mark. So if you're going to be selling one of these, take a photograph of what mark it says on it, because that would be the ultimate selling point for any of these masks. Mk1, very, very rare. You do get in intermediate variants, like I've said, and you get a mk7. So effectively, all of these up to the mk6 would be the last gas mask issued to the British Army, i.e. the gas mask that dealt with removing war gases. The Mark 5 version of the mask would be the last gas mask ever issued to the British Army in World War II. So these are the final gas masks to deal with actual gas in World War II. And the Mark 5 is the final gas mask issued to the British Army in the Second World War. After that, you would have slight variations in the Mark 6 and the Mark 7, which are post-war. And then after that, they will be killed off by the introduction of the SR6 and the new generation of NBC respirators. So if you've got one, do have a look and see what mark it is. It's kind of fascinating how they're kind of developed, and each one is a slightly different variation of the previous one. And most of these filters will be post-war dated. I mean, that's a post-war one. It's dated 1954. That's typical of a filter that you'll find. This one is 16th of the 7th, 1945. Okay, and this is how short-lived they were. Was issued on the 16th of the 7th, 45. And it expires at the end of 1945. So it had to be renewed, replaced. There was not much waterproof element about these filters. So yeah, so that one needs to go back with that one. And that one needs to go back with that one. So the next on my agenda would be a Mark 1, which I've never seen, and a Mark 7. And that will give me more or less the complete set. I mean, there are other anti-gas bits and pieces that go with it, but, you know, anti-gas equipment is anti-gas equipment. You've probably seen it all before. But yeah, that's the basic differences. Each one is a slight modification of the previous one. And thankfully, they are all marked up in their individual marks. And so this Mark 6 one, I think, this Mark 6 one, or the Mark 7, I think it was a Mark 7. The face piece, or the face blank as it's called, would be the inspiration for the S6 gas mask, the post-war one. So yeah, that's got post-war civil defence 1954. And also what can make them different is the difference in the head straps. Some are pure post-war made, and some are reissued wartime ones with the wartime dates cancelled out and post-war dates marked on them as they get inspected. So even that could make it a different sub-variant within the set. So yeah, so you can see how, you know, in the Mark 5, that piece with the holes in is black. In the Mark 6, it's got more smaller holes in it, and it's a kind of silver metal colour. So even that modification would make it not a Mark 5. So that would contribute to it being a Mark 6. So it's just slight little variations like that define the different marks. But like I say, thankfully, all the marks are actually on the chin of the mask themselves. So if you're going to sell one, take a photograph of what it says on the chin, because that will sell it. So hopefully you're still awake after all this. I'm fascinated that these boring videos appeal to some people. So tomorrow, with it being public holiday, no work, we'll probably go through the British World War II civilian gas masks. I have a few of those and some ephemera. So we'll go through them. If this kind of thing appeals to you, we'll go through it, because from what I've seen from the general service respirator video I posted, it's had quite a lot of views and quite a lot of people have been interested in this kind of thing. So tomorrow, if this interests you, we'll do the British civil defence, the civilian masks, and the civil defence services masks as well. I do have quite a few, and we'll have a look at some ephemera if I can dig it out, if I can find it. But for now, this has been the, well, what I call the light anti-gas respirator, because it's a lot easier to say than the proper termination, which is the respirator anti-gas light. It's the light anti-gas respirator. So that has been the video on these. So Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5, Mark 6, and Mark 6/2. Bye for now.